Hello, everyone on jewishlive.org and on Facebook and other places where you may be streaming us. Welcome to Jewish Wisdom for Coping with a Pandemic. Please feel free to click on the Zoom link if you would like to have the interactive experience. We like this to be very participatory, as those of you who have been with us for a number of weeks are aware. And as is our custom, we will start with a short meditation to help us become present and leave some of the worries of the outside world behind us. Please get comfortable in your seat and close your eyes. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you go at your own speed of inhaling through the nose and holding, and exhaling through the mouth and holding. If thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them go. Like watching a car pass on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. And Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. And Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, friends, our next step is I will begin to share the slides for today. Can you see this okay? The slides look good? Great. Thank you. So let's recap where we have come so far in this, the last day of our first Mussar cycle. We started as a spontaneous get-together on March 19th, and we've continued with a hiatus in between through, this will be the 13th soul trade, which is covered in my book. And this is one Mussar cycle. And then what we do after that is we go back to the beginning. So next week is going to be kind of a transition week where we're going to talk about what happens when you come to the end of the Mussar cycle, and then how we turn over, and we're going to begin to focus again on the soul trade of humility. On this next cycle, we're also going to be spending 2 weeks on each soul trade instead of a single week. So that'll let us go in a little bit deeper. It'll give us more time, I'm hoping and thinking, for some partner study. Maybe the second week we'll spend more time with our partners so we can go in a little bit deeper. And at the end of today, if anyone wants to stay on an extra few minutes and kind of give me any feedback or share any thoughts or ideas for our next cycle, I would be happy to spend a couple of minutes and hearing your thoughts. So today is the holiday of Tisha B'Av, which is remembering and mourning the destruction of the two temples in ancient Israel. Also, there have been numerous other calamities in Jewish history that have taken place on this day. The start of World War I, the expulsion from Spain, the expulsion from England. So this is the day where we remember and we mourn. One of the things I also mark on this day is when I return to the Rabbi Alan Liu's book, This Is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared, where he goes through the cycle of the high holidays. That is an amazing and incredible book. If you haven't read it, I highly, highly recommend it. I think it's a book we're going to be reading in 1,000 years. And he starts with Tisha B'Av. And he talks about this really, what I think is a very powerful idea. When we talk about the destruction of the walls of Jerusalem, he wrote, the walls come down and suddenly we can see. Suddenly we recognize the nature of our estrangement from the divine. So I would love to kind of hear some thoughts about that. Like, what are maybe some things that you can see? We're sort of in a time of destruction right now, where our political institutions are suffering, our whole global infrastructure is suffering, our social infrastructure is breaking. And so are there things that this virus and this situation has kind of brought up for you that are helping you see that maybe you had not seen before? And does the divine come into that in some way? How's that for a nice, long, complicated question?
I can say what has got me through this difficult period is not simply my garden. As I mentioned, I can plant a seed, but something else has to make it. But also, we put a bird feeder in our garden last week. And to watch the birds, to me, that brings awe.
Hmm.
And to know that, all we did, we're partners with God, as they say. Put the bird feeder there, but I can't make the birds eat. Can't drive them to it. Something else propels them.
Thank you. Oh, was there something more you were going to say?
Well, yes, and that is that I get to watch.
Yeah, you get to watch. One of the things that I wrote about in this week's email that went out was, sometimes just things show up at amazing and mysterious times. Like I was doing a study on Monday, and all of a sudden we were talking about awe in a chapter which didn't seem to be about awe at all. And this is the week where I've been thinking about awe. Well, I had one of the positive things that came out of the death of my mother and my aunt last year is I've grown closer to one of my cousins. And so I had a call with her earlier today. And she said, yeah, what's really helped keep me going during this time? She's like, I'd love to watch birds. And my husband installed the bird feeder outside our window. And so I said, and literally 2 hours ago, she almost word for word was sharing the same thing that Janet was sharing. And then she said, and I noticed how the birds are all getting heavier like I am during this, during this shut-in. So thank you. What else? Who else would like? Carol?
I'd like to talk, this is not recent, but I'd like to respond to what Janet said about the birds. When I was first diagnosed with cancer back in 2008, and when I went through some pretty rough treatment, felt pretty awful. And what I did was I would sit in my living room and I had a bird feeder outside the window. And I always say that the birds helped me get through that so much, so that now I have to feed them because I owe them. I owe those birds for what they gave me when I couldn't do anything except sit on a couch and watch birds. That was a gift of, I think, a gift of awe. And last night, when a hummingbird came through my backyard for a moment, I just stood in my window and watched it until it took a sip from the jasmine plant and flittered on to its next stop. Filled me with wonder.
Thank you, Carol. What does it mean to, where is he talking about? And we're sort of jumping right into this, but, you know, the nature of our estrangement from the divine. What might that mean? Does anybody feel a little like, you know, I'm not so on board with the divine, and don't care if I'm estranged anyway. So
I guess for me, it would be more my ego when I think about what we talked about last week, or ego kind of overlaps into this. The more I think of being closer to nature, the more I think of how much I do let my ego get in the way of awe. That's what I feel in it.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, and so in a sense, your ego is causing an estrangement from the divine nature, or kind of the natural world.
You hear me?
Yes.
I think Ariella was trying to talk. I don't know if she seemed to have a connection issue, so hopefully she'll dial back in. Other thoughts
Hello?
or comments? Yes.
Can you hear, Greg?
Yes, I
don't
can.
know if you can hear. Hi, I'm so glad I finally got on again. Thank you for
Good.
So estrangement from God, such a good question. What's happening now? One thing on a personal level is that it's not that I always went away from confrontation, but in a certain way I did, you know, about not speaking up about things or something. I didn't want to be confrontative. And I'm finding that now I'm actually saying things the way I see or something, and grappling and doing the struggle. And I did that with someone this morning that, you know, and I said, you know, we don't have to abandon each other because we think differently from each other. So I don't know if this is estrangement from divine, but how do we engage and keep the divine there close with us? So that made me think of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, there's a divine spark that's a part of everyone. So very much, you know, in a very real way, when we become estranged from other people, whether they're people we're close to or people who are strangers, when we really have divisions, that is an estrangement from the divine, because every person you're estranged from, you're estranged from their divinity as well.
I think that when you get too wrapped up in the day-to-day stuff of being busy, you get really busy trying to make money, clean your house, whatever it is. And you lose sight of those moments of wonder, and you forget to stop. And you don't stop to, you know, or you go out and you're walking, you just gotta go exercise, that's all you're gonna do. And this beautiful whatever comes by. You don't stop to smell the flowers. Beautiful cat comes by, meows at you, you don't notice it. I think that's when you really, really lose touch, because when you stop, if you stop and look around, there is so much that's amazing to see. The turning of the leaves, of course, they're bright green right now, but the way that the way that nature changes and cycles back, because the only real time in the world, we create time, but the only real time in the world is what nature creates. And the seasons, the cycles. And when you stop and look at animals, or, I mean, for me, horses always bring wonder, but so do the birds, so do the leaves on the trees. But if you don't take time to stop, then you will lose touch with that, at least for a time.
Mm.
You need to make space for it.
Great painting.
Thank you. So Wendy and Gail.
Yes, that's a great painting, Carol. You notice how when Carol speaks, it's always a painting? and she talked about not being able to see, and I was thinking the walls, when the walls come down, suddenly we can see. Well, the walls were up around all of our senses. We lost our senses. We were dead to our senses. We weren't sensing the divine. So the walls come down, and suddenly we recognize that the nature of our estrangement is in ourselves, not being able or allowing ourselves or stopping ourselves from actually being able to sense the divine. Because then I'm just thinking of the Grand Canyon. If there was a wall, when you walked out to see it, there's just a wall, you couldn't see it. And all of a sudden the wall would come down. Then you would see and hear and feel. And that's what I think the nature of the estrangement is.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes. Walls we construct ourselves over our senses. Gail, I saw you.
Yes. Yeah, I did. I work in 2 retirement communities, so I'm not allowed there now. So obviously those places are locked down tighter than many other places because of the risk. And in my mind, the crisis we're in from the cross-section I see is a spiritual crisis, that they need to feel the presence of God with them to support them and not be alone and not be as anxious, isolated from their family and friends as well. And so I feel the estrangement from the divine is something that I can almost feel in a physical way, because I'm kept apart from them and I try to bring the divine to them. And so I send them videos and I send them readings and I call them and everything, trying to keep in touch with people and remind them that they're not alone. But there's a distance, there's a chasm, and I can't reach people right when I feel they need it the most.
Thank you. Yeah, I know that my mother, for the last couple months of her life, when she was isolated in a nursing home, that was really tough. That was really tough. And one of the last gifts I sent her, she said, "I've read the Psalms so many times that all the pages have fallen out of my Bible. Would you mind sending me a new one?" So I sent her a new Bible. And spirituality can be a real solace for people. And when people are cut off from those who provide them spiritual guidance and everybody else, that's a big challenge. Yeah, thank you.
I would like to add something.
Sure.
One of the things that I'm aware of is, when in March we locked down, we started hearing people saying that some of the great divides in our culture, in our society, was bared, was made open, naked. And I think that with this kind of isolation, where many have been staying at home, you have room to think about things, about your own situation, but also the difficulties of other people, whether it's the people who work in the grocery stores or people who work in the hospitals. And I think that may have, that can be a kind of maybe a spiritual awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a long time we hear voices, those voices have been around, but it seems like they haven't been heard. But now they're more heard. But also, there's also a great spiritual divide in this country. And so you wonder where that's, well, we have an opportunity to maybe bring something new that's more genuine.
Thank you, Frank. Let's move on a little bit here. again, as is our custom, we always take a look at one assumption before we move on. And the assumption that I think is so important when we're dealing with awe is to remember that there is a divine spark in everyone. And within people, it's within ourselves that's occluded by our baggage, which makes it hard to connect with our own divinity. It can make it hard to connect with other people's divinity. And what's struck me from this conversation when we just started talking about, like, you know, the prompt on this last slide was, we recognize the nature of our estrangement from the divine. Most people talked about nature. And there seems like there's a very natural connection between nature and an understanding of the divine. And so I want to kind of put that out there. You know, do you think that there is a divine spark in everything? Now, we're created in the divine image. The rest of the creation story does not talk about that, but what is this relationship between the divine and the natural world in your view? And there's no right or wrong answers.
I feel like the divine spark is almost what's summarized in your last statement there, that it has a unique measure in each of us, even though if we all have the same soul traits. Nature has cycles. People will have cycles. I feel then where I'm at in my divine growth, and wherever that is true for me, but it won't always necessarily be true for someone else. But where they are is their divine spark, their divine growth, and where they're measured. And the word measure means that there'd be a calibration of a difference. But does that, like you said, Greg, it wouldn't be judgment, it wouldn't be right or wrong. Even as I'm saying this, of course, it wouldn't be right or wrong. It's just unique to that person or unique to me. And then there's that compassion of listening to each other's place in this, whatever this is.
Yeah.
That's how I interpret it.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, that was lovely. Other thoughts? Yeah.
You know, the Shema that we say at synagogue every Friday night, when we say the Shema, we say that the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. But I've read that the Hasidim of ages past, rather than the Lord is one, would say everything is God. You know, I've read people say, you know, you can find God in a parking lot, and that might be true, but I think it's a lot easier to see God in the processes of nature, and I find I experience that much more so. So that's essentially my statement there. That just you know, it goes back to nature again and finding our place in that. I don't want to imply that God is limited in that sense, but that I sense God in the processes of nature more easily than a parking lot, for instance.
Thank you. This is a slide we looked at last week, and it's a reminder that the trait, the sort of overall trait, is a Hebrew word called Yirah, which can be translated as either fear or awe. And last week we looked at this example of Yirah of the Lord as the beginning of wisdom. And there's a little bit of a different valence if we translate Yirah as fear, or as we translate Yirah as awe, you know, or awe of that. I'm not a big fan of thinking I should update this slide, because I'm not a big fan of the Lord, but I prefer the divine. But What might it mean if we were to just focus on this as awe of the divine as the beginning of wisdom? What does that bring up for you? And how might that be different from fear?
A real trust and faith in my safety, my being, that all is as it should be, that it is okay.
Thank you.
That's what it feels to me. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm hearing sort of positive words: trust, safety, acceptance.
Definitely faith. Yeah, faith.
Faith.
I think that fear or awe of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom means that you understand that there's mystery in the universe that you may never be able to understand. And I think you can't be wise unless you know there are things that you'll never know.
Absolutely. I mean, the universe is a big, huge place. I mean, I always get perplexed when people talk. I used to be a scientist. I used to publish papers. And, I have a PhD in biology. People are like, how do you kind of deal with this sort of faith and with the, all of this and plus the science? And they're really not different sorts of questions. I mean, you're delving into like the mysteries, and every question you answer, you raise 3 more questions when you're doing that kind of work. It gets very esoteric and theoretical when you're really sort of pushing the boundaries of science. Let's move on a bit more. I want to bring up a couple of things here. So last year when I was teaching Yirah in one of my groups, that very same week, this image came out of a black hole. It was the first time that a black hole had ever been actually photographed. And it was over 100 different kind of cameras from all over the world, astronomy cameras from all kinds of observatories. And a woman who was a graduate student at MIT wrote a computer program that could kind of compile and combine all of these different images into a single image of this giant black hole, which for me is quite, I find quite spectacular. And it reminds me of an image that I sometimes see in my dreams, where I first saw it on Yom Kippur, right before I was going to teach my first Mussar class, where I kind of fell asleep in services, and I had this dream and saw this black there was a fire in the sky, and then the stars were all gone, but then I could see these little coronas, where the stars used to be. And I said, that's our divine spark that's occluded by our baggage. So I personally find it so resonant. And could someone please read this first quote, which is one that I shared in the email for the week?
I'll read.
Thank you, Anne.
I thought I was unmuted.
Oh, excuse me. Anyone who knows how to calculate astronomical seasons and the movement of constellations and does not do so, the verse says about him, they do not take notice of the work of the divine, and they do not see the divine's handiwork. Duties of the Heart, quoting Shabbat 75a, which quotes Isaiah 5:12. Did you want me to read both of them or just the first?
No, just the first one. Okay, so this is, Duties of the Heart is the first full Mussar book that was written. It was written in the 11th century in Spain in Judeo-Arabic. And so what is, and he's quoting the Talmud, which was quoting, was also riffing on something from the book of Isaiah. So what is the argument here? What is it that they're teaching us?
They don't feel that the divine is, I don't think they feel the link between themselves and the divine, the humility and the beauty and all the part that goes with that. They don't feel the link.
Who doesn't feel the link?
Well, they keep saying they, anyone.
Uh-huh.
I wondered who they was too.
Yeah, who else has a thought about that? Who's the they that they're referring to?
I think it's talking about we should be embracing science and learning how the world works and not separating science and religion.
And where do you get that? Yeah, I agree. Tell me more.
Because you see the footprints of the divine, and you should be investigating it and learning about it.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, when we're calculating the astronomical seasons and the movement of constellations, I think what you're saying is those are the footprints of the divine. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So then someone who knows how to do this, but then doesn't do it, it's almost like it's a kind of sin, or it's a kind of a waste. It's a missed opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like if you have this ability to see this and to do this, whatever this gift is that you can do, and you don't do it, you turn your back on it, you're not using your divine spark.
Mm.
And you're not noticing what is divine in you and in the world around you, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my take on it.
So is it safe to say then that this black hole that we were able to see, that was brought to us in this image through all the science and how divine it is, bringing it down to our level, those of us who aren't scientists, myself, and look at the corona virus as part of a divine spark of evolution that now we're seeing. They say that, the scientists say that it's a offshoot of SARS and that viruses change and mutate. So this is our chance on this level, more closer to Earth, to look at this as the black hole that says, okay, well, I guess we need to look at this. And what does this give us? And how do we treat this? It's interesting. That's where I go.
Yeah, no, that's you're starting to go somewhere where I was going to try to ask a question to start to lead there, and I'll ask that question. No, it's okay. That's great. I love what you have to say, because it's like, what if we're not a scientist? What do we do then? Does this apply to us in some way?
Greg, I would like to add here that I see this, we all received a gift, different type of gifts. And if it is given to us, that's how the way the divine talk to us, through us, and we need to communicate to the rest of the population, explaining what our gift gave us and share with other people. Because black hole, it's sucking in everything, lights, matter, everything. So I think so this is the divine showing us, you know what, I can take anything I want. The universe, the Big Bang started everything, now this is how we're going away. So it's a gift and this person gave us a fantastic gift to see something unimaginable ever before.
Right. So it's that, I love that. It's sort of tying in the fact that someone who has these talents and gifts, they can use that to, I mean, this person who's such a genius who figured out how to do this, she could have written a computer program to predict stock market transactions. And, you know, try to, some physicists go, they work for Goldman Sachs and they try to make, you know, billions of dollars for the company. You know, this person says, I'm going to create an image of a black hole. I'm going to use my gifts to sort of notice something incredible about the universe and then allow other people to sort of say there's this black hole, which is kind of this abstract thing. Suddenly here it is. You know, I can see it. So that is pretty amazing. Does this only apply to people who know how to calculate astronomical seasons? I mean, are there other things that we...
No. I don't think so. I think we're all given our own gifts. I'm not good at math or science, but I can write a decent poem. So maybe that's my gift. And you bring that to the world, you do what you can. I always thought teaching was my gift, you know, to reach out to children. And lately I've been getting messages from former students that, yes, it was. So that we each, and one of my friends is a terrific writer, news writer. And that's a gift she brings. Another one is a wonderful singer. I think we all have something that we can put into the world that contributes. And if we don't, if we hide our light under a bushel, that's not maybe what the divine wants.
Thank you, Carol. And I think, you know, your comment, it reminds me of one of the key things in the second bullet, where it says the calculation of the seasons, etc., as the calculation of experts is witnessed by all. So the experts kind of do this stuff, whether it's the teaching, you know, no one can just walk into a classroom and teach children, not well. I made a big mistake going to try to teach 8th graders about 3 years ago. That was the last time I'm doing that. I was like, oh, you'll be fine. I was not fine. I was a disaster. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. I felt so bad. So, you know, that is
the hardest, Greg. It really is. Been there, done
yeah,
that.
it is. But and it wasn't for me, let me tell you. So, but there's sort of experts. Experts are to be witnessed. They're to be revered. But I would also add that I could rewrite this to say anyone who knows how to watch a bird and does not do so, you know, they do not take notice of the work of the divine. Or anyone who, you know, can listen to music and does not do so. Or anyone who, you know, doesn't pick up a crying child. There are lots of things that we can do where, you know, there's lots of gifts with a small g. It's like, it's not my talent to be, I'm not an expert bird watcher, but I can watch a yellow bird fly around and appreciate it if I make the effort. Okay, well, as usual, we're spending a lot of time on a lot of stuff. I want to take a moment on the spectrum of awe, because again, this is how does this show up for us? You know, we have our own natural spectrum. And what about these extremes? You know, what sort of jumps out for you? Or are there ways that you see where maybe you've fallen into a trap of kind of being out of balance for awe? Would anyone care to share how this might show up in their life? I know in the book I shared a story where it's from my journal, where I was driving home from somewhere and I started to get stressed out, and I could literally feel the world contracting. Like my peripheral vision started going away. I just couldn't see anything. I was like, wow, you know, I had to actually start paying attention to my driving more, because I was getting actually so distracted by like the thoughts in my head. So it was all just kind of being sort of closed, you know, so it's building walls to like the world around me, to use our analogy from earlier.
I had an experience. Oh,
go ahead, Leslie.
I had an experience with someone who had too much awe, and I was a little put off. So I used to walk with a friend, and sometimes we'd just chit chat about, you know, nothing serious, and then we would stop and take photos of flowers and notice things. But on one walk, I was sharing a story that was really important and serious, and she kept interrupting and going, "Oh, look at that tree. Oh, look at that bird." And I felt like kind of just like not heard or not respected. Like that wasn't like, could she have waited 5 minutes or something? So, you know, she was so lost in the environment that she didn't realize I needed to be like listened to for a few more minutes.
Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, that's a good example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, it'd be too much worry. If I start to worry, I would, then I find I'd start to disconnect.
I think with too much awe when you're driving isn't a good thing. You're talking about driving and, you know, driving through the forest and, oh, it's so beautiful. And look at that bird. Oh, I heard a bird of it. No, next thing you know, you're starting to slide off the shoulder a little bit. Not a good plan. Keep your eyes on the road. I speak from experience. I have occasionally gotten a little too distracted driving along Highway 9 or along the ocean or something like that. Because
or when you're driving right through a double rainbow, it's really hard to look at the road.
And you have to decide, well, yeah, I think I better just pull over and stop and look at this thing instead of staying on the road. But yes, it can be, you know, this feeling of, oh my gosh, this is so amazing, can be a little overwhelming when you're supposed to do something else. You know, you walk right into a tree.
Yeah. All right, let's prepare to get into I'm going to split everybody up into pairs. And there was another quote from Duties of the Heart, which I thought was really cool. The whole world is made up of the material and the spiritual, so intimately mixed and fused that each of them sustains the other, like body and soul in living creatures. So with your partner, I'd just be curious, like, can you relate to that statement? And if not, that's okay. That's worth talking about too. And how might your life be different if you could tap into kind of a spiritual layer of the world, if it helped to kind of remember that there's material and spiritual? And could that even extend to a parking lot, you know, to bring up a question that it's much easier to see in the rainbow or in Yosemite, but is there, you know, if I can't go to Yosemite right now, I'm stuck at home. So are there additional ways that we can find awe? And of course, as always, to check in where you are. Let's see. So, if, you know, I'm going to open the breakout rooms, and if you go to a room and nobody shows up, just hang out, because I'll either assign somebody else to your room, or you'll get like a little button on the screen asking you to move to a different room. I'll move you somewhere else if that doesn't go. So have a great conversation, and I'm gonna open the breakout rooms and stop the share. So you should see a button on your screen that says Join Breakout Room X. Oops, it's not there yet. Okay, now the rooms are all open. Jeannie with us here? Okay, let's see. Okay, there we are. Oh no, oh shoot. Crap. I just, sorry, Anne, I accidentally hit the close breakout rooms button. So
Okay.
as soon as everybody's back, I will open them up again. Restart the recording. All the insights private. That's okay. You know, this idea of looking for God's footprint or looking for the divine footprint in nature, this is not like a new thing. This is not like an Enlightenment idea that sort of came along and worked its way into Judaism. I want to share with you a passage from the Bible. There are many that we could have picked. You know, this one is from the book of Job, where in the story, Job has all these misfortunes. He complains to God. God finally starts to answer him. And part of the answer is what we see here. May I have a volunteer to read this?
Sure, I'll read it.
Thank you.
Okay. Does the eagle soar at your command, building his nest high, dwelling in the rock, lodging upon the fastness of a jutting rock? From there he spies out his food. From afar his eyes see it. His young gulp blood. Where the slain are, there is he.
Thank you. So how does this relate, or does this relate to what we've been talking about? I think it does. Other people may have different interpretations since I picked it to be shared here at the end, but any thoughts? What is the author of the book of Job describing here? What's the view of the world?
Yeah, I hear that there's a whole cycle of life in this. Starting with a foundation, creating that foundation for yourself, for others, and then lodging. So you wait, or you're patient, or you're in this, and you're having faith, and then you find your sustenance from afar. You see it, and then you take that sustenance and you share it or give it, and then eventually something will have to die from it again. So in all of this cycle lies his faith in God and God's faith in us. So that's what I hear.
Great, thank you. So you're seeing a story about faith, but also a story about the cycle of life. Yeah, wonderful. Janos, I saw you may have been talking, but you were mute. I don't know if you had something you wanted to say as well.
No, I'm more like having an awe now. I need to digest this.
Okay. There's something very majestic for me about eagles soaring in nests and a certain brutality of nature too. You know, a real invitation to kind of see the world the way it is for its majesty, and you know, some of the rocks are sharp, and you know, something dies and something else is living off of its blood. And so I think I think it's also an important part of awe, is remembering the part that we play in the world, that we are not separate from it, that we are a part of this cycle as well. And if we think that we can just exempt ourselves from the laws of nature, you know, as I think people are doing with refusing to wear these masks, it can be a deadly decision, because the world is a dangerous place. The last in closing, I'm going to share with you this quote about Yirah. So, and we'll do this as kind of a closing meditation. So if you could please, once more, close your eyes. Relax in your seat and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. Orchat Sadakim, The Ways of the Righteous, medieval Mussar book. It says about Yirah is like a knot which secures all of the other good traits. And if you remove it, all the good traits will depart from you. So as we're bringing our first Mussar cycle to a close, think about how awe can secure some of your other traits. If you're struggling with patience during the quarantine, how might awe help strengthen your patience? If you're struggling with anger, how might awe help alleviate some of that anger and transform it into positive directions? If you're struggling with keeping a neat house, how might awe help you to deal with that situation? Or if you're struggling because you get anxious if your house isn't perfectly spotless all the time, how can you let some awe into your life and remember that chaos too is a natural part of the world? How can you let awe into your life? Just a bit more. Thank you all so much for being here today. Next week, we'll be looking at chapter 17 in the book, which is we're beginning the cycle anew, or we'll begin to work on the soul trait of humility. I am going to